Josh.
Hey Antoine, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing well.
So how are you surviving quarantine?
It's been busy. I've been in my hometown of Erie, Pennsylvania for the past few weeks and headed back to the DC area this Saturday, but it's been certainly busy. We've been keeping up. As you can see, I'm doing the virtual meetings with
Yeah,
congressional members and staff and still gotta keep up appearances.
yeah. Well, I know we've been the same way. It's been not business as usual, but same workflow, just different, I guess, setting.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything moving digital and, it's tough being in a relationship driven business, making the adjustment, but I think it's been positive. We've had a lot of good interactions with retailers, manufacturers, as well as, our federal contacts and state contacts. And there's a lot going on in government. There's no shortage of things to do. And we've been extremely busy during the past 2 months.
But I guess that's a good thing.
Yeah,
So at least
exactly.
work is still getting done despite all this that's going on.
Absolutely.
Well, what I wanted to do today was, I wanted to speak about everything that is going on because I feel like, I don't know about you, but a little bit disconnected from stuff just because I could see on a digital side that there is a little bit of a disconnect with people because they're so like bogged down at home and they don't have that usual workflow of going into an office, checking their emails, keeping up with the flow of the usual stuff. So I thought, this is kind of a nice way, a little bit of a digital new wave kind of way to reach out to people and hopefully connect with them and give them the vital information. And especially with it being able to play back, for those people who can't catch it, just a nice way because people I found like to listen and watch something more than they sometimes like to read. So um, this is just delivering that news to them in a different kind of way.
Well, it's fantastic. I mean, it's an incredible resource, and I've reached out to you, and I've watched between this Cigar Dojo and Coop. We definitely have a lot of content and information that's informative, entertaining, and you can really connect with the cigar community during this time. I think that's the thing that I miss the most of working in DC. It's
Right.
all the different people that come to the office, have a cigar, have a casual conversation, talk about the issues of the day. But forums like this allow others the opportunity to, really dive deep into some of the stuff that we're working on, but also have that connectiveness. And it's a lot different than January when I last saw you
I
at
know.
TPE and had a great time at the conference. But, I'm glad we were able to connect today.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess we should start with the big subject, which is substantial equivalence. And I know there's a lot of movement last week about it, and there's a lot of push, in the weeks previous to it, kind of leading up to what happened last week. So just for those people who might not know what substantial equivalence is, can you explain it to us in kind of a layman's terms so that everybody can understand what it
Yeah.
is?
Yeah, so it's a requirement for all tobacco products to either have a pre-market review or substantial equivalence. It's essentially allowing a product to be marketed by the Food and Drug Administration. And most of the substantial equivalence reports will be the pathway for cigars and premium cigars in particular. It's a complex, document process. And the FDA hasn't made things any easy for anyone in telling the industry what needs to be included in these reports. They've made the requirement you have to file these. And prior to the court decision last week, the deadline was fast approaching. It was May 12th of 2020. And that was in part due to a court decision where a group of the anti-tobacco groups sued, primarily involving vaping products,
Mm-hmm.
and basically saying with everything that was going on with vaping, they wanted this deadline moved up. It was originally set for August of 2021, and that changed things. And with the coronavirus, there were a dozen groups that requested an extension to that deadline, with the decision that, May 12th, fast approaching, people would have to start submitting those documents. We were able to get a 120-day extension, which will bring that to September 9th. I mentioned there was a dozen groups, different parts of the tobacco industry making different requests. Our request was originally for 6 months for premium cigars exclusively. I think everyone, with everything that's going on with the coronavirus, it isn't reasonable that these reports could be filed given that time frame and everything that's going on. We're talking about reports that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, hundreds of hours of human resources put forth, travel, research, data. So it simply couldn't be done. So it's a good thing that September 9th is the new deadline for that, but we're still hard at work, hard charging to get the substantial equivalence process to be improved and streamlined, so that it is a little bit more easy for manufacturers of premium cigars to enter the market.
Yeah, and I guess with this process, I mean, do you have any idea if, just because it has an extension basically come September 9th, is there going to be any more clarity to it? Like, is there going to be any more, is the FDA going to actually release more guidance to explain some of the kind of gaps in it now? Or is it just going to be same situation where we could be in like the end of August and still wondering what exactly are they looking for? What exactly is this process going to entail? What do you think about that?
I think there's definitely going to be some progress between now and September. Before everything started to shut down in March, we were actively meeting with the administration, with CTP, presenting our concerns to the appropriate stakeholders, trying to work towards a middle ground, something that can be accepted by CTP, but is a reasonable solution. I mean, we're still trying to get exemption for premium cigars, but recognizing we need to negotiate on several fronts. Michael Edney's doing an incredible job on the litigation side and the various lawsuits that are out there. We're working on the advocacy and lobbying team to communicate concerns to the FDA. And it's resonated. I mean, you have members of Congress, almost weekly sending letters, making calls to the FDA on our behalf saying, hey, something needs to be done about the substantial equivalence rule. That is our North Star, has to be addressed because, right now we're being told it's that trying to fit a circular thing in a square hole. That expression, it's not workable, and the reports on substantial equivalence, but also harmful and potentially harmful constituent testing. Each tobacco product, and this, has different characteristics, has different qualities. The position of PCA has been for tailored regulation. That a premium cigar doesn't and shouldn't have to have the same requirements as some of the other products that are out there, and vice versa. That uniqueness and artisanal craft qualities, we really feature those. But I think there were some hearings. Commissioner Hahn, when he presented in Congress, Representative Andy Harris asked a question about substantial equivalence, and the commissioner said that there was going to be more guidance and we would get more information on the substantial equivalence rule to make it easier on this issue. So we're following up with that congressional office to see if that information was actually sent, and also pressing forward with the administration contacts and the FDA.
Yeah, and it's when you follow all the legislation stuff that's been happening and that's impacting the premium cigar industry, it's funny because it's not really driven by premium cigars. I think, as you mentioned, it's kind of driven by vapor or e-cigarettes, and then premium cigars is just lumped into a big category. I've never gotten a pulse for how people in the industry feel about that. because it's one of those unspoken things, especially like with us working with TPE, for example. You know, we work with two sides of the aisle, so we've never really gotten into it. But I mean, you having, like you said, people come into your office and talk about like how do they feel about, like you said, being grouped into this one giant category instead of having like that tailored approach to
Yeah,
regulation.
I mean, I think that it's resonated that we need to have responsible solutions, ones that allow legal products to be sold to legal age adults. You know, that's kind of the standard across the board. So, now, we've had to shift towards the end of last year into this year on the T21. That's another area where the FDA was ill prepared and didn't release guidance to anyone, whether you're a retailer of a premium cigar or a vapor product or anything across the board. You were told to instantly comply with something, and there was no additional guidance there. So I think industry wide, that's something that we're hoping we can get guidance that's specific to premium cigars, but also when it is applicable across the board. We want folks to be able to have that clarity and have that business certainty. You have PCA members that sell other products, and also, premium cigars. So we're looking across the board. Obviously, our position is premium cigars, the uniqueness, artisanal qualities, but we want to make sure that we're able to provide the resources for our members to comply to all of the different regulations and legislation across the board, and really influence it before it becomes a problem, before it has to go to the courts. So, I think that's one of the things that we've been very active, and as an association, fighting above our weight class, so to speak, especially on retail issues, small business issues. COVID-19 has put associations like ours that have small businesses to the forefront, and we've had a seat at the table and a voice, and that's allowed us to really talk about a lot of issues that are related to tobacco, but get an inroads through some of the retail small business areas where we wouldn't be able to otherwise connect with certain congressional offices.
And just with like issues like substantial equivalence, I know the retailers seem to understand this issue a little bit better. I don't know if the end consumer has. I just say that because, for the consumer, like especially the summertime with the IPCPR/PCA show, that's like when you get like all your big releases. And I mean, usually from like May 1st, like onward, you're just like inundated with press releases and announcements of new releases. So to them, I mean, it's like business as usual. But like, I think if you're in the industry, you kind of see, what's coming with substantial equivalence and how that could impact it. So just for those consumers that might listen to this or watch this after the fact that we've done it, can you explain like how this impacts them? Because I don't know if they really get it. I think they kind of see it as a manufacturer issue. Like, this isn't going to impact me. It might impact the people who make the cigars, but it doesn't trickle down to the consumer side.
Yeah, well, I think, it affects everybody across the board: manufacturer, retailer, consumer. Manufacturer literally to be able to sell your products. I think it affects the retailer of, what is permissible to be on your shelves. And then from the consumer, it really is about your options and your choices. And, if this rule goes into effect as it currently stands and the requirements are, you will see a significant portion of the market exit the market, especially small batch, limited releases, things along those lines. It's just not economically feasible to have a limited edition 1,000-box line when the cost of getting a marketing or substantial equivalence designation would be hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I'm enjoying a Tatuaje small batch that's available at Up Down Cigars during Mardi Gras. Something like that, it would be hard to justify the cost. And there are certain grandfathered products that if you were on the market prior to 2007, you don't have to worry about the pre-market review substantial equivalence. But for a lot of the newer companies out there, this would, wipe out entire lines. And I've had discussions with, some prominent manufacturers of some of my favorite cigars, like Roma Craft Tobacco. They're a 2016 company. Things like that, it really restricts the creativity of the industry. And I think that that's one of the messages that we've been putting forth, and also getting companies like that to carry that message, like CLE and, Christian Arroyo, folks like that, that would be significantly affected with it. But to answer your question directly and simply, consumer choice is definitely hindered by the substantial equivalence rule.
Right. And I mean, on that topic of new releases, I mean, I think we talked about, or you all talked about this at TPE, but like, are companies even really able to release anything new right now? Because you see, like I said, you're still seeing, even from when the deeming rule was announced to now, you're still seeing new releases come out. So there's like I think a huge kind of disconnect in between like the legal side of it, and then how they kind of find a loophole to get like a limited run out or whatever. Like, what should we really get? Because I think we're all confused by that, because like I said, we're seeing two completely different messages here.
Yeah, well, definitely if you're a manufacturer, you're thinking about producing a cigar, you have to have a team of lawyers. Unfortunately, especially in this, we've been providing a lot of guidance to manufacturers and retailers as they ask questions. We work, with two law firms, and get a lot of those specific in the weeds legal questions, and we'll address those on an ad hoc basis. On March 19th, we released a statement as PCA, kind of updating everyone on where things stood. There has been a lot of confusion. You're absolutely spot on with that. Some folks with that grandfathered status, have been reaching out to retailers saying, hey, we have grandfathered products, buy our products, because if they're not grandfathered, you're going to have the FDA coming to your store, taking it off your shelves, and it's going to be contraband product. Now, that's not the case, and that's why we had to provide that nuanced position. There's a lot that, could transpire between now and September 9th. There are court cases, and you saw, with the COVID-19, the extension that was granted. So, that has been a concession that has been made. Premium cigars, specifically speaking to that category, in January, it was determined that we're the lowest enforcement priority. And that was a designation in a document. We're waiting to see what that actually means, and if that's going to translate into further policy considerations. And if that does, that will have an incredible effect in things like substantial equivalence and some of these rules as they're applied. So, we were helpful for that. Basically, we told the folks in the administration, we're grateful for this, but we need something that has legal bearing that we can utilize, again, to provide that certainty. And this administration, has championed itself as deregulatory, as something that would provide small business certainty. And we've been reinforcing that, basically saying, the messaging that they've put out over the past 3 years, this is a perfect issue. This is going to affect an incredible amount of people, 30,000 jobs in the retail sector, 120,000 in secondary and tertiary industries. So it's, has far-reaching weight. In states like Pennsylvania and Florida, it's even heightened. So we really need to put that message forward and get the job done so that we have regulatory certainty, before September 9th now and onward.
Yeah, and I guess, that is another big issue that we're facing. Like, this is an election year. How much is really going? I know when the Stephen Hahn got appointed to take over as the FDA commissioner, there was a kind of a news item about it because we did have all this regulation stuff going on, and again, it was more about the vapor stuff, but it was how much can he get done with this being an election year. Where's the focus going to be? How much power, like I said, does he have? So like in your experience in this industry, how does the election year kind of impact regulations and everything going on?
Yeah, I think that the regulation side and the administration, even in the midst of COVID-19, you're seeing, regulations continue to be promulgated. CTP is still doing a lot of its routine operations. They suspended some of the inspections for a period of time. But, from early January to February 6th, they had 2,300 retailer inspections. So, they've continued that. Warning letters were just sent out to some of the vapor companies today. So none of the day-to-day functions of a regulatory agency really cease. They continue that. So, we have to be continuing our advocacy message. We don't want to appear tone deaf, but we have real problems with deadlines that are approaching that we have to get forth. Congress, as well as, even some of the governors in prominent states are helpful in keeping that message going, especially during an election year, because they get the political consequences. And I mentioned those numbers, 3,000 small business retailers that are essential to their communities, 30,000 employees, 120,000 plus 3 million consumers. That is a powerful voting bloc. That is a powerful voice. And we need to do a job, our job as PCA, as CRA, as some of the other groups that are involved, to really harness that power of the people that are interested in this industry and direct those efforts accordingly. There are so many different contacts in the administration that we can be reaching out to, so many members of Congress. We really need to be calculated, deliberate, and also, forceful. We have to make sure that we continue this message and carry it forth during this time, during this difficult time, during the election year as well.
So for manufacturers right now, I mean, I guess they should be planning to have to comply for now, unless something happens in between now and September. So what can they be doing, or what should they be doing or thinking about now? Because it's going to be, I mean, in a couple of days, it's going to be May. So,
yeah,
and the summer goes by really quickly. And then all of a sudden you're at the tail end of the summer. And I mean, the kind of stuff that I've read about that would be part of the, substantial equivalence process. I mean, it takes time. So hopefully, like, what should they be doing if they haven't started already? Hopefully they have.
Yeah, when the FDA did release, a statement on the court decision, they also released a new web page with some of those resources that address pre-market review, that address substantial equivalence. Very high level. It's not what is needed to fill these reports out properly, in my opinion. So, we still have a lot of work to do on the advocacy side. We have the litigation prong that still is in effect. I would say, and again, I deal with most of the retail issues. From the manufacturing side, I would look at all of the information that is available on the CTP website, some of that new information that was just released last week. You have to be constantly consulting your attorneys. And, if you have specific questions, myself as well as our regulatory counsel will provide some of that information and feedback. Again, we have open lines of communication. One of the things that I will say is that, the Office of Stakeholder Relations at the FDA has been responsive in answering some one-to-one questions as it relates to, some of the substantial equivalence issues. We have not gotten the information that we needed because of pending litigation, because of things that have been going on. But I would expect, open dialogue in the next few weeks with CTP and with the associations that are interested in this issue area.
Now looking ahead past substantial equivalence, I mean, what's the next kind of biggest deadline or issue that we need to be kind of focused on as an industry?
I think the next biggest issue, and you've already seen this pop up in states like New York and Virginia, is taxing. We are the entire industry and every product that tobacco business covers, as well as, the premium cigar industry, in this next state legislative cycle, in the federal level, in the new Congress, we will be under siege with taxes. They are going to be looking for revenue. All of these trillion-dollar programs at the federal level, providing aid, providing assistance to certain industries, somebody's going to have to pay for it. And they're going to look to areas like tobacco to provide that shortfall. You also see revenue shortages in governments at the state and local level. We're talking about whole states, that could declare bankruptcy or don't have the funds for things. So they're going to be looking for tax increases across the board, and tobacco tends to be a low-hanging fruit for them. So again, when I talk about mobilization and grassroots and working with CRA and working with PCA, that's going to be essential coming forth in the new Congress and the new state legislative cycles, because we will have to deal with that. A couple of months ago, we talked a lot about the Pallone bill. When we were at TPE, that was something that was top of mind. Sherrod Brown, senator out of Ohio, has a companion bill, 3174, which S3174, which is very problematic. It has a ton of restrictions on the entire tobacco industry, and sponsorship for premium cigars. It would get rid of a lot of events like the Heritage Festival, things like that, charitable contributions, things that would decimate the industry that don't have any rhyme or reason. That's going to die in the Senate this year, but we're going to have to be very vigilant for next year. They're going to try and sneak in provisions. You saw a lot of misinformation by a lot of the anti-tobacco groups, even through this COVID-19 discussion. So a lot of what we do is rapid response. When something comes out, we need to respond and set the record straight. And when I'm meeting with members of Congress and the administration, and my counterparts we're citing FDA data, NIH data. These aren't industry studies, but you have a lot of manipulation on the other side, and we have to set the record straight on that. I think lastly, one of the things that we'll be working on is reopening. When retail stores in states are ready to reopen, PCA wants to work with our retail members to provide guidance to the states to make it so that they can conduct business in a way that's safe, sanitation standards. We've been trying throughout this whole crisis to provide accurate information about what accommodations retailers and manufacturers can do to sustain their businesses. And we were able to get a 90-day extension on some tax deferment for manufacturers. That's something that we work with Customs and Border Protection. Very small issue, but that's going to have millions of dollars of an effect. And, so we're looking for opportunities like that where we can weigh in for ways that we can help a robust, sustaining premium cigar industry.
And I guess, on that subject, the PCA works with and represents a lot of retailers, big and small. So what are you hearing from the retailers about how COVID-19 has impacted them? Like what are their fears? What are their pressure points right now? What are some issues that, it's just besides not being able to operate as normal, that they're, looking at?
Yeah, it's been a difficult time for everyone across the board, and our industry definitely has a unique set of challenges. I think, a lot of the enactments at the state and local level have been, very restrictive to anyone that's involved in the tobacco industry. We've worked in some states to get essential business classifications, to work to make accommodations for some of our retail members. You're seeing a lot of people with ingenuity, curbside to go, contactless transactions, developing e-commerce sites and local delivery. We're a resilient industry. I think that you saw a lot of retailers come up with creative measures to keep, components of their business sustaining through this time. I think it's going to be important that, once things are up and running, that, manufacturers, retailers, and consumers are working together. I know that, some of our members, like I said, I'm in Erie, Pennsylvania here. I've ordered cigars from Uptown in Chicago. I've ordered some from Dave Garofalo. It's been good to, support those small businesses through this time and continue to do so, especially when we get past the bulk of the storm. But they've had unique challenges. I know in Colorado you had, carte blanche. The cannabis industry was able to operate as normal, but you had tobacco businesses that weren't able to. And we had some of our members getting a lot of media attention and press talking about the disparity there, that this isn't something that should stand. You can't have government arbitrarily picking businesses that are able to continue to function and not continue to function. We want to make as many accommodations as possible, and again, broker discussions with manufacturers and retailers. You've seen some manufacturers offering stimulus packages of their own. The solution is going to be part governmental. It's going to be part us advocating to government for solutions, but also it's going to require us internally to make our own policies and adjustments to support the industry.
Yeah, definitely. Because I know, like you said, there's so many manufacturers that are stepping up and trying to help out where they can. But I think we're all kind of, we're not sure what to do. We're not sure what when this is actually going to be over. I think that uncertainty never is good for the industry. So it's a very kind of tricky situation, because it's not like come May 1st, everything's going to be back to normal. It's going to be a phased rollout for a lot of us, and it could trickle into the summer. And this is, impacting a lot of small businesses' profits for the year. I mean, to be operating a month or two kind of in a hole basically is hard. Yeah.
It has been difficult, and I think for the first 4 or 5 weeks, I was on calls, 40 or 50 members each week. What can we do here? What can we do there? And the tough thing, I run our federal relations, but it's been all hands on deck on some of these local and state things as well. And we have an incredible team of regional lobbyists that have been, working on some of these issues and trying to address as many member inquiries as possible. And, one thing that I would say across the board, if you have ideas or ways that we can be innovative as an industry for the folks out there that are retailers, manufacturers, or media, we are open ears. Scott and I, have been working on a lot of these different plans over the past few weeks, trying to do as much digital engagement and bring the voices together. And I think, shows like this are very helpful. And we've been doing a few industry panel sessions, and really maximizing the time. The other thing we are launching this week is a town hall series with members of Congress. If you're a PCA member, associate member, you will be able to have a dialogue with members of Congress directly. I think that's very important to build that grassroots foundation. So we have a session this Thursday with Representative Guy Rushenthaler of Pennsylvania, who's a champion of the premium cigar industry, was at the state level and now is at the federal level. So, we're trying to also shift ourselves as an association to a lot of these digital things. We had a very successful public engagement series at the townhouse where we would bring 100 plus, people in the DC area, congressional staff, members of Congress, to learn about the premium cigar industry. And that has shifted over to digital. Thursday, we're having a session with Pete Johnson of Tatawahe and Phil Ledbetter of Up Down Cigars, and kind of talking through, how's COVID affecting you? What are some of these ways we can help support the industry? So some of the questions that we're talking about today, we're getting people that are in the field working on these things.
And I guess, how important do you think, or what role do you think digital is going to have in the industry going forward? Because I know me, I've always had to work on the digital, but the industry hasn't always been there. It's been playing a lot of catch up either way, trying to get people more into the digital space. And I know this industry is very traditional, so they still like their magazines, print magazines. They still, enjoy pamphlets, pieces of paper. They like their trade shows coming there, being, in person. But it's like this whole situation is causing us all to have to pivot and really kind of address, not being able to like gather in big groups, or not being able to, consume information in the same way. So what role do you think having, like you said, the PCA having grasped the digital thing and doing it a little bit more lately, do you think that's going to be a permanent thing going forward, or do you think it'll be kind of phased out and replaced kind of with the old way, as the year goes on? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, first and foremost, we are a relationship industry. There's nothing, and whether it's advocating before members of Congress or the administration, person to person, having a conversation is the best that we can do. But, I do think that a lot of these digital engagements will sustain, especially with the association. We're going to continue our traditional print magazine. We're working on the next issue of that. But, these digital engagements have been very positive. And I think that, folks want to hear from the organizations that represent them. The industry is not going to agree with everything. There's going to be some friction. There's going to be some factionalism. But the one thing that I can offer to people across the board is that we will listen. We will take the feedback. And I have an open line of communication. I give my cell phone out to everyone that wants to have a conversation on ways that we can improve. So, I think that digital is going to be a component of it. I think that you've seen a lot of brick and mortar retailers, develop websites that advertise their products. I think that, you can have the best of both worlds where, a retail tobacconist can advertise through some digital means, but you can go into their shop and have that, in-person experience from an experienced tobacconist that, I would not be able to understand the premium cigar industry if I did not spend hours upon hours in Georgetown Tobacco or Drapers, right, or, those places, having in-person conversation and having the ability to connect with people. And, retailers bring in the manufacturers, they bring people with a wealth of knowledge into their stores through those live events. I can tell you across the board, everyone misses those events. I miss going to, Drapers and meeting people that are in the industry, hearing their story. We've been able to complement some of that and supplement that, during this difficult time through some of these conversations. But, being able to, have a cocktail and a cigar with somebody in the industry, there's nothing that beats that. And that's, what drew me to the industry, coming from the community banking side of things. The beauty of working in the premium cigar industry is that relationship-driven, in-person dialogue. So I think it'll be complementary in the future.
And a few minutes ago, you talked about the different organizations kind of having to work together in some way. So, like, I've seen lots of your press releases come out lately, and it's a joint statement kind of press release where you and Cigar Rights, like, more and more. And I know we all were kind of devastated by the news that, Glenn Loop would be leaving CRA, come at towards the end of the year and stuff like that. So, I mean, what is that relationship with the other trade organization? How do you kind of figure out, who's going to represent this part of the issue compared to this part, and kind of come together? Because it's almost like a transformer type of approach where, PCA might be like focused on just this part of the problem, but then you have NATO over here, or you have Cigar Association of America over here, Cigar Rights, over here doing the same thing. So how do you all kind of communicate to figure out so you're not tripping over yourselves?
Yeah, I mean, we have an open dialogue. As you mentioned, with Cigar Rights of America, we've had a cooperative partnership with them. During my time with the association, I think that Glenn has done a fantastic job. Their team continues to do a fantastic job and have been doing so for a while. I'm incredibly impressed by the CRA board. And the amount of time that they put into it. Same thing with the PCA board. We would not be as successfully in our advocacy effort if we did not have engaged stakeholders like the CRA board, like the PCA board, meeting on a regular basis with elected officials. It's going to happen this week. But we keep an open dialogue across the board. In running our federal operations, we keep a dialogue, with Cigar Association and all of the trade groups. I think one of the things that I wanted to position PCA is a hub that, we're not going to agree on everything, but we will communicate, our policy positions clearly. We will work with people, and we'll have an engaged dialogue. And that's all anyone can ask for. So, I think that we're a retailer first organization going back to our history. But we really want to see the premium cigar industry succeed. And that's why, we'll work coordinately. We don't want to have overlap on some of the resources. I think that, CRA and NATO put out some great informational things. I think that we put out a lot of great things. From the COVID-19 response, I would take the PCA materials that we have been putting it out and compare it apples to some of the large associations like the, National Federation of Independent Businesses and the Restaurants Association. We've been able to get our information out at a rapid pace so that, if you want information on the Paycheck Protection Program, you have it the next day and you can fill out your application and get to the front of the line. So I think that that's important. I think all of, there's definitely some, factionalism and, friction that comes with part of the job. But, it is something that is not uncommon. You have every industry that has things like that. We have our own set of challenges and opportunities. But, and I'm coming up, I think next week is my 1-year mark as a full-time employee of PCA. And I'm incredibly grateful for the opportunity. And, every day I wake up hoping that we can improve and sustain this industry, because it is a great thing where you have personal stories and things that, we're very proud of. I had a conversation with Alan Rubin a couple weeks ago, and, they're providing food for 700 employees for 30 days. And, you have just so many stories of that generosity, of that positive impact on communities. And, being the retail side, these are cultural, social centers where people talk about politics. They talk about, topics that otherwise people wouldn't want to, talk about at all. So, by that nature of the industry, it is very communicative. Sometimes you have some controversies here and there. But for me, I don't look at it as a negative. I look at it as a positive, and we're always open to hear outside voices.
And just talk, since we have 15 minutes left, let's touch on that material you've been putting out about COVID-19 and what retailers can take advantage of. So what is some of those resources? Because I don't know if everybody's been seeing it. I know I see it because I'm on Facebook all the time and I see you all post it on there every day. But like, what are some of the things that retailers can be taking advantage of right now when it comes to COVID-19?
So there's a couple of different resources. We did a webinar. It's funny, time blends. So I want to say 2 weeks ago, a webinar on the Paycheck Protection Program, some of the emergency disaster loans that are available. So, you know, that segment, it's a 45-minute webinar, really walks through all of the benefits that are available to retailers, small businesses, and even some small manufacturers. So that's a resource. Also, as part of that Paycheck Protection Program, we had a webinar earlier today that addressed about how to turn those loans into grants to ensure that you're able to keep as much money as possible from that government aid programs. So a lawyer and an accountant provided that representation, and we're on that resource. So we really wanted to keep those two as our core points. We have a web page dedicated to COVID-19 resources. For the first 2 weeks, we were providing daily updates, what's going on the legislative front, and also, communicating our advocacy priorities to elected officials. One of the shortfalls, I think, of that Paycheck Protection Program is you had this huge pool of money that was granted and everybody needed it, whether you were a restaurant, a premium cigar retailer, a casino, like across the board, everyone was going for this money. And the Small Business Administration was the one administering this program. And Congress really didn't put any of the infrastructure in place, human resources, financial capital, for the SBA to administer that program. So it was reauthorized last week. An additional $310 billion was granted, but today you had their website crashing again. So, it's been one of those things where I would say be patient. I know that it is extremely difficult. This is livelihoods and businesses that are on the line, but we're talking about massive expenditures that are, in totality, GDP percentages and whole economies that are being spent, and you really have a limited number of people that are administering this program. We also wanted to make the funds that are part of this program easy to use for retailers. So there were a lot of criteria that were set. We want folks to be able to use the funds for rent. That seems to be an area that is the biggest concern for retailers, in addition to being able to use it for payroll. So those resources, we have a lot of web resources out there. We've been doing those 3 at 3 segments with different folks in the industry, and a lot of ideas have come up. And then I mentioned pretty much weekly we're doing a guide on different things. Last week it was e-commerce. The week before it was on curbside to go. Things like that would be really unique and specific for how to operate a business in that. And again, we're combining governmental and non-governmental resources.
Right. So, it's like, just taking a step back for PCA, like who should be a member of PCA? Because I think sometimes we just assume people know, and maybe they don't know anymore. But who are your kind of like target people that you're trying to get to sign up to be a member these days?
For sure. So, we, I mentioned we're retailer first. So if you're a retail premium tobacconist, that's our core membership. We also have associates that are manufacturers and media. So, there's ways to join there. You can find a lot of that information, the specific criteria, on our website, premiumcigars.org. On the advocacy side, we have another website, cigaraction.org. That is for anybody and everybody in the industry. It's free. It's not a membership classification, but it's if we have something that pops up that's a legislative issue in Virginia, and you're from Virginia, and you're a consumer, you're an employee of a tobacconist, you're an owner, you're a manufacturer, you name it. If you're interested in, and some are folks that are not even cigar enthusiasts, but they're, pro small business, pro free enterprise, you can go in there and take action, sign up to receive some of our emails. Again, it's just informational. We've been producing a lot of content that is across the board for the industry to be the voice of the industry on some of these major issues. So, there are obviously the main membership types, retailers and manufacturers, media, but on the advocacy side, if you're a consumer or interested in some of these issues, there's a place for you. And, we've been able to fight on some of these issues that are specific. An example of that was an action alert that we released for the T21 going way back about trying to get concessions for people in the military, provide a military exemption. So we had folks that were, just members of the military that wanted to have that choice. That's an example of some folks that aren't necessarily in the premium cigar industry that have been working with us on some advocacy fronts. That in order to succeed in Washington, and I've learned being there a decade, you have to have coalitions of people. You have to have diversity in communicating your issues from a variety of different vantage points. And that's really why we have that Cigar Action, to be a one-stop shop. If you're listening to this segment and it's your first time, learning about premium cigars, or you see a Facebook post of ours that's interests you, go there to find more information and ways to get involved.
So I think for the last question, I'm going to take it back to somebody asked this question at TPE, but they wanted to know, on a local level, what's one thing that you would tell them that they can do to kind of create change for the industry?
For sure. I think the local and state level is where folks can have the greatest impact. And really developing a core group. It can be very informal, but starting a Facebook group of, I'm Erie, Pennsylvania, cigar enthusiast in Erie, Pennsylvania. And it can be predominantly fun loving, where you post your favorite smoke or a review, or, hey, this is an interesting article, things like that. I think, basically taking that information, coalescing and building a group, then you're able to, when it becomes time of challenging a local ordinance that's, banning smoking, you can activate that group, developing that personal relationship. So, unfortunately right now you can't meet with your local council members and your local, state legislatures, but eventually we'll get back to that. So my recommendation, now we have some active alerts that are on there. I mentioned Sherrod Brown's 3174. You can go on there and oppose that bill. That's a step forward. Occasionally we'll have some different petitions. We'll be putting out materials where folks can get involved with the industry from a low, the easiest area. We refer to things a lot of times as the ladders of engagement. Get people interested, maybe retweet something, maybe retweet an article that you wrote about the tobacco industry, and you're getting that out to more audiences. And then eventually, come February of next year, when we're doing our industry fly-in, volunteering and coming and meeting with your U.S. Senator or your congressman. We want to work to people. Part of my job, in addition to lobbying and advocacy, is civic education. I got to teach people how to communicate it with government, that how a bill becomes a law, and government 101. And that's my resource to the premium cigar industry. So, if people have questions or, want to learn more, we're developing those resources too that are, not cigar specific, but are civic specific, how to get involved.
So if people want to follow you or get in touch with the PCA, having listened to this or watched it, how can they do that?
I think best way to contact me is LinkedIn or my email address, joshua@premiumcigars.org. Our website has, as I mentioned, a variety of different resources. I think especially during COVID-19, you'll see a lot of new resources, as you mentioned, on Facebook. Our staff is very accessible. We're a lean, mean group of 7. When things pass with COVID-19 and things resume, if you're ever in the Washington, D.C. area, feel free to get a hold of us. I think some of the best conversations and developments and ideas that have come up have been folks that have visited our townhouse near Union Station, where I can, have a cigar and discuss with them some of the pressing issues of what's going on.
Well, I mean, we're at the end of our time together, but I think it was fun, and I definitely learned a lot about substantial equivalence, and I hope people who watched learn more and learn about some advocacy things they can do. And hopefully we'll do this again, because it seems like every other month there's a big legislative something going on. So a good time to maybe follow up and do this again, maybe once a month or once every other month, depending on how quarantine goes and COVID-19 recovery goes and how I adapt to the new normal.
Exactly. Well, Antoine, I really appreciate all that you do for the industry and tobacco business. And, I had a great time on the panel at TPE, and I think that it's good to keep this dialogue and information sharing out there. And I'm always accessible, whatever you need.
Hey, thank you so much. Don't worry, I will be reaching out.
Well, have a good rest of your day, and hopefully you get to enjoy a good cigar tonight.
Yeah, same to you.
Take care.
Bye.